17,000 feet above sea level, where human lungs struggle to extract oxygen from air too thin to sustain life, where temperatures plummet 40 degrees between sunrise and sunset, where landscapes exist that seem borrowed from another planet entirely. This is the Tibetan Plateau. 3 million square kilometers of the most extreme terrain on Earth, higher than the Alps, vaster than Western Europe, and largely unseen. While millions flock to the famous temples and the well-trodden paths to Everest's southern face, another Tibet waits. Lakes that shift through 70 shades of blue in a single day, canyons deeper than any other on Earth, unknown to the world until 30 years ago. Grasslands so vast they create their own weather systems. Peaks that pierce through clouds and touch the edge of space itself. This is not the Tibet of guidebooks. This is not the Tibet of tourist itineraries. This is the Tibet that hides in plain sight. The Tibet that demands payment in altitude sickness, bone-numbing cold, and roads that exist only as rumors. The Tibet that reveals itself only to those willing to venture beyond comfort, beyond convenience, beyond the boundaries of ordinary travel. Satellite images show the truth. Massive blue jewels scattered across a plateau of browns and whites. Mountains arranged like dragons' teeth. Rivers carving impossible gorges through the youngest, tallest mountains on the planet. But satellites can't capture what matters. The way light bends through ice crystals at altitude, the sound of absolute silence at 15,000 feet. The moment when the human mind finally grasps the true meaning of scale. Welcome to Unseen Tibet, where Earth shows its raw power, where beauty and brutality occupy the same vista, where the planet itself becomes the journey. At 14,436 feet above sea level lies Yamdrok Lake. Square miles of water that should not exist. Fed by mountain snowmelt and glacial streams, this massive lake has no outlet. No river carries water away. No underground channel drains the basin. Every drop that enters Yamdrok stays locked in a closed hydrological system, cycling for an average of 127 years before evaporating into the thin Himalayan air. But the true mystery isn't the hydrology. It's the color. Yamdrok shifts through a spectrum of blues and greens that defies simple description. Beyond the known, beyond the accessible, lies Puma Yumko, the lake that touches heaven, 16,700 feet, surrounded by peaks that surge to 23,000. Accessible only by a rugged track that climbs 3,000 feet in 20 miles, crossing 3 mountain passes where oxygen levels drop to 60% of sea level concentrations. The lake stretches for 9 miles, narrow and serpentine, compressed between mountain walls so steep they appear artificial. The water achieves a shade of turquoise so vivid, so saturated, it looks like industrial dye poured into a mountain reservoir. But this color is entirely natural, entirely pure, entirely the result of glacial minerals meeting pristine water at an altitude where atmospheric interference nearly disappears. And then there is Namtso, the heavenly lake, 70 kilometers long, 30 kilometers wide, the highest saltwater lake in the world at 15,260 feet. Namtso occupies a tectonic basin formed 30 million years ago when the Indian subcontinent collided with Asia, raising the Himalayas and trapping ancient seawater in a high-altitude prison. Over millennia, the water grew saltier through evaporation and mineral concentration, creating a vast inland sea surrounded by snow-capped peaks. These lakes, Yamdrok, Puma Yumko, Namtso, represent just 3 jewels in Tibet's crown of high-altitude waters. Over 300 lakes larger than 1 square kilometer, the plateau. Most have never been studied. Many have never been named in any language but Tibetan. They exist in a realm where geography still holds mysteries, where maps still contain blank spaces, where Earth still reserves the right to surprise. Deep in southeastern Tibet, a river performs an impossible feat. The Yarlung Tsongpa begins on the slopes of the Himalayas at 17,000 feet. It flows east for over 1,000 miles across the Tibetan Plateau, gathering meltwater from 100 glaciers. And then, where the eastern Himalayas force it to choose between stopping or finding a way through, the river chooses violence. The Yarlung Tsongpa Grand Canyon, the deepest canyon on Earth. The gorge was unknown to Western science until 1994. Indigenous peoples knew it, of course, had lived alongside it for millennia, but no comprehensive survey existed. No digital maps. The canyon was too remote, too dangerous, too wrapped in clouds and legend to document properly. When explorers finally penetrated its depths, they discovered an ecosystem unlike anything else on Earth. At river level, 5,000 feet above sea level, subtropical jungle thrives. And there's permanent ice, glaciers, snowfields that never melt. And dominating everything, creating its own weather systems, bending clouds to its will, stands Namcha Barwa, 15th highest mountain on Earth. But more importantly, the highest peak within proximity to such low elevation. The vertical relief, the sheer distance from base to summit measured in actual air traveled, exceeds virtually any other mountain on the planet. Namcha Barwa means mountain that pierces the sky. The summit exists in the jet stream. Winds at the peak regularly exceed 100 miles per hour. Clouds form, swirl, and dissipate around the summit in cycles that repeat throughout the day. Clear views are rare, but when the clouds do part, the revelation is absolute. But this extreme landscape isn't empty. People live here, have lived here for millennia, and their survival required engineering solutions as sophisticated as any found at lower elevations, just different. At 15,000 feet, the human body operates in a constant state of controlled crisis. The air contains 40% less oxygen than sea level. Heart rate increases, breathing deepens, blood thickens to carry more oxygen per unit volume. These aren't temporary adjustments. For people born here, they're permanent physiological adaptations. Traditional Tibetan architecture reflects this environment. Stone buildings with walls 3 feet thick. Small windows, not for aesthetics, but because every opening is thermal liability. Flat roofs that accumulate snow for insulation. White exteriors that reflect summer sun. Dark interiors that absorb winter warmth. The design isn't beautiful by accident. It's beautiful because it works. Form follows function with such precision that the result becomes aesthetically pleasing. This is engineering distilled to its essence. Settlements cluster near water sources, rivers, springs, lakes. At this altitude, water determines everything. Where you can settle, where you can graze animals, where you can grow limited crops during the brief summer growing season. The staple crop is barley, highland barley, specifically adapted to altitude and cold. It grows in 90-day cycles when most crops require 120 days or more. The grain is roasted and ground into tsampa, a flour mixed with buttered tea to create a dense, calorie-rich food that requires no cooking and travels well. This isn't gourmet cuisine. It's survival food refined over centuries. Efficient, portable, nutritious. Everything food needs to be when your environment actively tries to kill you.
100,000 pieces of agricultural.
Yaks provide everything else: meat, milk, butter, wool, leather, fuel from dried dung, transportation. A single yak represents wealth, utility, and insurance against disaster. Lose your yaks, you lose your capacity to survive winter. These animals are specifically adapted to altitude. Their blood carries oxygen more efficiently than lowland cattle. Their lungs are larger relative to body size. They can survive on grass so sparse it appears decorative. They're biological engineering solutions to the same problems humans face, just evolved rather than designed. Monasteries and temples dot the landscape, built on hilltops for visibility and defense, constructed with the same thick-walled technique as residential buildings. But their function goes beyond religion. They're libraries, schools, medical centers, courts for dispute resolution, weather prediction stations, monks' tracking patterns, predicting storms, warning communities. Community centers where festivals gather hundreds from scattered settlements. Prayer flags stretch across mountain passes, faded by sun, shredded by wind, replaced seasonally by locals maintaining traditions that serve both spiritual and practical purposes. The flags mark trails, indicate safe passes, guide travelers through landscapes where visibility can drop to zero in minutes during storms. Beyond the monasteries, beyond the settlements, Tibet harbors human presence in places that defy expectation. Above 17,000 feet, scattered across the plateau, stone structures cling to cliff faces and mountain slopes. Not ruins, not abandoned, hermitages, meditation caves. Retreat sites occupied for months, sometimes years, by solitary practitioners seeking isolation that simply doesn't exist at lower elevations. These locations aren't accessible by road. Trails, when they exist, require hours of steep climbing in air that makes every step an effort. No electricity, no infrastructure. Supplies carried up twice a year by those committed to supporting the practice. The hermitages themselves are architectural minimalism. 4 walls, a roof, small openings positioned to block prevailing winds, identified through centuries of observation. The structures occupy microclimates where south-facing slopes catch maximum sun, where elevation is high enough for absolute solitude, but low enough for marginal survivability.
These are the hermitages. So now
some of these structures have existed for centuries, rebuilt when stones collapse, reoccupied when one practitioner leaves and another arrives, maintained not by institutions or funding, but by continuity, by someone always willing to endure the isolation, the cold, the months of absolute silence. Survival here depends on knowledge as much as endurance. Hidden springs, unknown to outsiders, provide water that remains liquid year-round, not marked, not mapped, passed on quietly, through memory, from one generation to the next. This knowledge still exists among the most remote communities, the oldest herders, those who remain at extreme altitude through every season. But its transmission is failing, not forbidden, not suppressed, simply becoming unnecessary, as GPS and modern forecasting replace observation and memory. What remains, when the knowledge fades, are the structures. Hermitages standing empty, shelters waiting for occupants who may never return. This is the unseen Tibet, not hidden landscapes, but hidden systems. Survival infrastructure built over millennia to allow human presence where human presence should not be possible. Networks of knowledge so effective they became invisible, taken for granted, until the moment they disappear. The northern edge of the Tibetan Plateau does not fade gently into lower land. It ends abruptly, a wall of mountains stretching thousands of kilometers from the Pamirs to the interior of China. The Kunlun Mountains, one of the longest mountain ranges on Earth, and one of the least known. While the Himalayas draw attention, climbers, and maps filled with names, the Kunlun remains largely ignored. Too remote, too difficult to access, too far from established routes. Here, entire valleys have never been surveyed. Peaks rise above 7,000 meters without names, identified only by coordinates on satellite imagery. Unclimbed, unvisited, absent from human ambition. The Kunlun forms the northern boundary of the Tibetan Plateau. To the south, high grasslands shaped by thin air and seasonal moisture. To the north, the Taklamakan Desert, one of the driest places on Earth. The transition is immediate. Cold plateau gives way to absolute desert within a matter of kilometers. Sand, wind, years without rain. The Kunlun stands between these extremes, catching what little moisture crosses the desert, holding snow, feeding glaciers that briefly release water before it disappears into sand. Permanent settlement is impossible here. At the northern base of the Kunlun, the environment doesn't transition. It fractures, from mountain to desert in the span of 5 kilometers, from snow and ice to sand and absolute dryness. The shift is so abrupt that standing in one location, you can see both extremes simultaneously. This is one of the sharpest ecological boundaries on Earth, and one of the least studied. The desert here is the Taklamakan, not the tourist routes along its edges. The interior, where sand dunes reach 300 meters high, where summer surface temperatures exceed 70 degrees Celsius, hot enough to kill exposed skin in minutes, where rainfall is measured not annually, but per decade.
But where the mountains meet the sand, meltwater from Kunlun glaciers creates something unexpected. Ephemeral streams. They flow for hours, sometimes days, then vanish. Not gradually, suddenly. The water simply disappears into the desert substrate. Wildlife uses this zone despite its instability. Wild Bactrian camels, not descended from domestic stock, but genuinely wild, a separate species that was never domesticated. Perhaps 1,000 remain. They navigate between mountain springs and desert scrub, drinking from streams that may not exist on the return journey. These animals can go weeks without water. When they find it, they drink prodigiously. Tibetan wild asses, Kyang, also use the interface zone. They move in herds, covering vast distances, tracking water sources through mechanisms not fully understood. Observation suggests they navigate by wind direction, by the behavior of ravens, by subtle temperature differences that indicate moisture. Predators follow. Wolves adapted to both alpine and desert conditions. They hunt at the boundary, exploiting prey that must concentrate near the few reliable water sources. The hunting pressure is intense. Any animal drinking becomes vulnerable. The margin for error is non-existent.
Nearby, two lakes complete the sacred geography. Lake Manasarovar, 15,200 feet. Freshwater, pristine blue, fed by glacial melt from Kailash itself, and immediately beside it, separated by a narrow isthmus, lies Rakshas Tal. Slightly lower, slightly darker, salt water. Two lakes, side by side, freshwater and salt, separated by a thin strip of land you could walk across in 10 minutes. Nature created this arrangement long before humans arrived to interpret it. The region around Kailash remains largely unchanged despite increasing tourism. The remoteness provides protection. Getting there requires days of travel over rough roads. Altitude sickness affects most visitors. Infrastructure is minimal by design. The landscape itself enforces a natural limit on human impact. From Kailash, plateau extends in all directions. To the east, the great river canyons already described. To the west, more mountains, more ranges, the Hindu Kush and Karakoram forming a barrier all the way to Afghanistan. To the south, the Himalayas, young and violent and still growing. To the north, the Kunlun Mountains and the beginning of the Taklamakan Desert. Kailash sits at the center of Asian geography. Literally, a hub from which the continent's major features radiate. The mountain's position is not spiritual metaphor, it's geographic fact. The grasslands appear empty, uniform, endless horizontal under brutal wind. But winter tracking data reveals something wrong. Wild yak herds vanish into coordinates that show nothing but flat ground. No shelter, no features, just open plateau. Ground teams arrive at the locations, find wind-scoured grass, exposed earth, exactly what satellite images predicted. But the yak survive there. 100 animals, through storms that killed exposed livestock 50 kilometers away. The answer is measured in centimeters, not meters. Shallow depressions invisible to human eyes, deep enough to trap warm air, to create wind shadows, to turn lethal conditions survivable. These micro-refuges exist scattered across 700,000 square kilometers, unmarked, unmapped, known only to species that depend on them. Tibetan antelopes shift birthing grounds yearly, always to locations where snowmelt created brief food access. They're tracking environmental patterns at resolutions no survey has achieved. The grasslands aren't uniform. They're coded, complexity hidden beneath apparent emptiness. And the animals read what we can't see. At night, the grasslands reveal their true scale. The Milky Way doesn't appear as a faint band. It dominates, a river of light so bright it casts shadows across the plateau, detailed enough to see structure, individual clusters, dark dust lanes threading through billions of stars. This is what 14,000 feet of thin atmosphere produces. Light that doesn't scatter. Clarity that makes the sky feel closer than the horizon. The silence is physical. No insects, no wind in this moment. No distant sounds because there is nothing distant to make sound. Stand still and your ears search for input. Find none. Create phantom noise to fill the void. The absence becomes presence. Tibet exists at the intersection of extremes. Highest, coldest, driest, windiest, most remote. These aren't marketing claims. They're measurable facts about a region that pushes every boundary of terrestrial environment. The Tibetan Plateau represents 3 million square kilometers, roughly the size of Western Europe, averaging over 14,000 feet in elevation. No comparable landmass exists on Earth. The largest, highest plateau on the planet, surrounded by the tallest mountains, containing the deepest canyons, supporting ecosystems that evolved in isolation for millions of years, and still largely unseen, not hidden, not forbidden, just difficult enough that it remains largely empty of human presence. The altitude alone eliminates most visitors. 75% of people ascending above 12,000 feet without proper acclimatization experience symptoms. Headache, nausea, confusion. The air doesn't negotiate. The roads close 6 months a year. The weather swings 50 degrees between noon and midnight. The distances require days to cross. These aren't obstacles to overcome. They're fundamental characteristics. Tibet doesn't yield to human will. It allows presence on its terms or not at all, but that's what preserves it. The difficulty is protection. The harshness is the barrier. What makes this landscape brutal to access is exactly what keeps it intact. The mountains here are among the youngest on Earth, yet they're tens of millions of years old. The lakes have cycled water for centuries. The grasslands have supported migrations for millennia. And through it all, the plateau has remained high, cold, indifferent, operating on timelines that make human history irrelevant. The lakes will continue shifting through impossible colors. The rivers will continue grinding deeper through stone. The grasslands will continue holding complexity beneath apparent emptiness. The mountains will continue rising, millimeter by millimeter, pushed upward by forces we measure but never control. This is what unseen means. Not that it doesn't exist, but that it exists whether we're there to witness it or not. Somewhere above 16,000 feet, ice is fracturing in patterns no one will see. Water is flowing into hidden refuges animals know and humans don't. Peaks are catching light that won't be photographed. Still there, still functioning, still extreme, still unseen.